It's Let's Talk Legal Time once again made possible by Neumann van Rooyen Attorneys, and with me in studio I have Simei. Simei, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi Jessica, so good to be here with you.
So Simei, on the 31st of March this year, new regulations relating to trusts were published. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes, of course. Essentially, the new regulations require the disclosure of beneficial ownership as it relates to trust assets. And further, it requires the Master of the High Court to keep an electronic register of said beneficial owners.
Now, what do you mean by beneficial ownership?
Beneficial ownership can actually be split into 5 broad categories. The first being a natural person who directly or indirectly ultimately owns the relevant trust property. Secondly, a natural person who exercises effective control of the administration of the trust arrangements that are established pursuant to a trust instrument. Thirdly, each founder of the trust. Fourthly, each trustee of the trust. And lastly, each named beneficiary in the trust deed.
Now, what would you say is the purpose of these regulations?
Well, Jessica, initially these amendments to the Trust Property Control Act and its regulations was rushed through Parliament towards the end of 2022 to avoid the grey listing of South Africa, which we now know in any case happened. But I would say the main intention behind the amendments and regulations is to prevent the misuse of trusts and to ensure that there's accurate, timely information regarding the control of these trusts available to the relevant authorities. However, that being said, the electronic system that the Master was supposed to have operated from the 1st of April this year is still not up and running, and despite this failure, trustees run the risk of a 10 million rand fine or imprisonment if they don't comply with the requirement to disclose the beneficial ownership. Ultimately, I think it is high time South African legislation focuses on combating money laundering. However, these amendments and regulations were rushed through Parliament without taking into consideration the practical implications.
Well, Simei, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us a bit more insight into this matter.
Thanks for having me.
And there we have it. That wraps up this week's episode of Let's Talk Legal, made possible by Neumann van Rooyen Attorneys.